So hello and welcome to our webinar today, the 2 types of guilt and how you never have to feel guilty again. If you're watching this webinar live, I invite you to share it on Facebook right now, and also if you're watching later on demand, please share it later. If you know somebody who constantly feels guilty, then they need to listen to this information. Now, if you're wanting to get notifications of these weekly free webinars, then the direct link is here. You can come back and look at this on the replay, and that will give you access to the webinar login each week rather than just watching on Facebook. Our agenda today is the 2 types of guilt and how to distinguish them and why we need to be able to distinguish them. And why actually 95% of our guilt is what we would call false guilt, and therefore only 5% is really real. And how this false guilt and even how the real guilt is set up, and how we can let both types of guilt go so that we can live a guilt-free life. And I can assure you it is possible. So if this is the first time you're watching one of my webinars, just a brief introduction to me. My name is Kim Knight from kimknighthealth.com, and I teach people how to identify the root cause of their life problems. Now, a lot of people come to me for health issues, but when we dig down, we discover that the cause of these health issues is actually much deeper. It's more psychological things going on, emotional things going on, whatever traumas and unresolved life issues we have going on in our life, either in our current day or from the past. These all lead to a state of disease, because disease is a state of dis-ease. So I teach people how to absolutely get to the fundamental root cause of whatever problem is showing up in their life and then clear that. And by the way, all life problems are a form of illness. You can ponder on that one. Now, before I go further, just to say that I do not diagnose, treat, cure, heal anybody. The information that I'm sharing comes from my personal experience plus many years of working with clients. But it is up to you how you take this information and use it. So let's get straight into the webinar. 2 types of guilt and how to never have to feel guilty again. Let's look first of all at the definition of guilt. The fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. So in the dictionary, they're saying basically you've done something wrong, right? And therefore we feel guilty. And as I'm going to show you, most people don't realize that there are 2 types of guilt, and they're feeling bad often for things that they haven't done wrong. So we need to learn to distinguish between real guilt, which I call healthy guilt, and false guilt, which I call unhealthy guilt. So why is real guilt healthy and why is false guilt unhealthy? Well, either way, doesn't matter whether it's healthy or unhealthy guilt, it still leads to overthinking, worrying, anxiety, rerunning of stories in our mind, going over and over again in our mind over what's happened, feeling bad, feeling wrong, feeling that we're in the wrong, maybe feeling that we've been wronged. It's all connected. And this in turn has a physiological effect on our body, because whatever is happening emotionally and mentally inside of us will have a physiological effect. It's the law of cause and effect, and we cannot separate inside our body what happens mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Everything is interrelated. So if we do too much worrying, overthinking, rerunning of stories, feeling bad, etc., sooner or later we're going to have a physical consequence of all of that going on, and it's going to start to show up. So for example, it'll start showing up by putting our stomach and our digestive system out of balance. We may start having sleepless nights and a lot more than that. So let's look at these 2 types of guilt. Real guilt is when we've done something wrong and we genuinely need to apologize. We need to make amends. False guilt is when we haven't actually done anything wrong, there's nothing that we actually need to apologize for, but it feels like we do need to apologize. We keep thinking and feeling we've done something wrong, we're bad, we need to apologize. But actually, they're very, very different. Real guilt and false guilt are very different. So let's start with the false guilt. This is the one that most people tend to experience, even though they don't realize it. So false guilt is when we have not done something we need to apologize for, but we feel we do. We feel that we need to apologize, or that we've done something wrong. So why is it that if we haven't done something wrong, we feel we have? Why is it that we have this feeling of guilt inside of us, that we feel we've done something wrong, and actually going to discover that maybe you haven't? Well, if we dig deep, what we're going to find underneath, and this is where most people don't tend to go, but what we find underneath is that we have deep feelings of unworthiness, that we feel unworthy and we feel undeserving. And essentially we feel bad. We feel unworthy, for example, of putting ourselves first. We feel unworthy of standing up for ourselves, of asking for what we want, speaking our truth, or even being happy. And for some people, deep down, even deserving to live. It goes that deep that we feel that we just don't deserve to be alive and that we don't deserve love. And the thing with love is it is our deepest essential need, or deepest essential emotional need as a human being, is to feel loved and cared for. So why does all of this get set up? Well, in my experience, it's the first 7 years of life. Everything starts in the first 7 years of life. And we create what we call false limiting beliefs as a result of traumas and negative experiences which happen to us in childhood. And then we try and protect ourselves from feeling further negative emotions. And we come to believe falsely, I don't deserve love and happiness, I don't deserve success, respect, acknowledgement, all this positive stuff that actually every human being needs, which is why the Human Givens Institute call these needs human givens. They should be a given. But often for many of us, they are not. We do not receive this in childhood. We do not experience feeling safe, supported, cherished, loved. And as a result, we come to feel that we are bad. There's something wrong with us. We don't deserve. And then we create false beliefs such as, I don't deserve X, Y, Z. Now, this has to be changed. If we want to find our way back to happiness and health, this has to be changed. And if we continue with this false guilt, it leads to a truckload of self-doubt, worry, anxiety, overthinking, and then even illness later down the track. So let's look at real guilt. Real guilt is when we've done something wrong or something slightly wrong, and we need to apologize or make amends. And we know this because real guilt is felt quite differently, which I'm going to share in a minute. So we're going to learn how to distinguish between these two types of guilt. But real guilt is a part of our body telling us you have actually done something wrong, you have stepped out of line, and you need to apologize. And until you apologize, that feeling of real guilt is going to stick around, right? Because this is very connected in with our internal moral compass, which everybody has. If people don't have an internal moral compass, it doesn't mean they don't have it. It means they're just really disconnected from it. And usually the reason they're disconnected from it is because of the hurt and trauma that has not been recognized and resolved. So here's a question. I want you to think of a time when you did something wrong, where maybe you snapped at somebody and it wasn't, you know, they hadn't done anything wrong, but you were just in a bad mood and you snapped at somebody, or you were rude to somebody, or just you did something where you know you were overstepping the boundaries, you were stepping over the line, and you caused discomfort to another person, and you knew it was your fault. And think of that time. Think of that that memory, that event. And then I want you to tune into your body and tune into when I did that and I knew that it was the wrong thing, where did I feel that feeling of that doesn't feel right, that doesn't feel good, I feel guilty about that. And what you're going to find is that that feeling is generally in the heart. It's in our heart. Now, the reason it's in our heart is that our heart is part of our internal guidance system to tell us what is right and wrong. And we actually have a brain in our heart. You can go and check out my 3 brain video for more on that. But we have a network of neurons in our heart, and neurons are there for an intelligent purpose, and we literally have a heart brain. And our heart brain is very connected with our values. It is connected with our emotions and our feelings. The heart is also very connected with honesty. It's also connected with respect. And in Chinese medicine, in the meditation series that I teach, My Smile, Your Way to Inner Peace, you learn how the heart is connected with respect and love. That means respect for ourselves, respect for others, and how your heart is this internal guidance system telling you what is right and what is wrong. And so our heart is always feeding back to us, this is right, this is wrong. So if we've done something wrong, our heart is going to tell us, that's not right, that was not fair treatment, so I'm going to send you this sort of weird feeling of discomfort and unease, which we label as guilt. And I'm sending you this because you need to do something about that. You need to make amends. So the question is, how do we reverse this real guilt, this healthy guilt? And what we have to do is we have to swallow our pride and we have to apologize. So I'll give you an example. I remember I was at a conference one day at a hotel, and we were in a break, and it was very busy, and I just wanted some time out, some in our break. And I suddenly get this call from a, what do you call it, like when they do these cold calls and they're trying to sell you something. I can't remember what the term is for that. But I get this call from somebody trying to sell me a service of some sort. And I just was not in the mood to speak to this person, and I was very short and abrupt. And I just said, listen, I don't want to talk about this. And I put the phone down, and I knew that I had not been polite. I could just feel it in my heart. Even though I didn't want that service, even though that person, it was none of their fault, that they had to ring me and try and sell me that service, I should have treated them with more respect. But I didn't, because of the mood and the state that I was in at that moment. And my heart just felt horrible. And here's an interesting thing. Our heart in Chinese medicine is directly connected with the tongue. The tongue is the child organ of the heart, and I go into this in deep detail in my Smile Your Way to Inner Peace meditation series. So our heart is deeply connected with the tongue, and the tongue is the child organ of the heart. And when we go and say something, because we speak with our tongue, when we go and say something that is not respectful, is not kind, our heart knows, even before we've spoken, even before the words come out of our mouth, our heart knows whether it's the right thing to say or not. And the more in touch we get with ourselves, the more that we can actually sense that before the words even come out of our mouth. And even if they do come out, we still know afterwards that didn't feel right. So I just felt awful. My body sent me healthy guilt because my body was telling me, or my soul, because our heart is very connected with our soul, was telling me that was not a nice thing to do. You need to apologize. So I rang back and I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. And I just want to apologize. I'm not interested in your services, but I should have been more polite. And of course, the other person felt better because they had been treated with respect and honor, and I immediately felt better. Now, one of the reasons that most people don't take action on this type of guilt, even though it's only happening maybe 5% of the time, is because they're afraid to swallow their pride, right? Because we have to sort of feel a little bit icky as we swallow our pride, and that is normal. So I invite you to try that. And I remember in one of our trainings a few years ago, one of our teachers saying that if you have a situation where, for example, 95% of it is not your fault, but 5% of it is, you still need to take responsibility and apologize for that 5%, because otherwise this feeling of guilt, it just lingers on inside of you. And because it's very connected with the heart, that it literally on an energetic level is damaging our heart. It's damaging our being. And essentially all unhappiness and illness is self-damage, right? Even if it started early on in childhood where it wasn't our fault, we continue to damage ourselves. So we have to stop this damage. So that's how to deal with real guilt. We just have to apologize, swallow our pride. So, differentiating guilt. How do we differentiate between this real, healthy, and the false, unhealthy guilt? Well, the real guilt, as you've now learned, is mainly in the heart area. Could be felt elsewhere in the body as well, but mainly in the heart. Whereas the false guilt tends to be more in the head. It tends to result in more thinking and overthinking. And as I said before, real guilt, in my experience, this is just my statistics. This isn't any scientific statistics out there. This is just my philosophy, that there's this real guilt, which is really only happening 5% of the time. Or we could say it's like this percentage of real guilt will equate to how much do you treat other people unfairly, right? So maybe this is just my statistic. So how much do you treat people unfairly? And that will equate to the level of real guilt. And remember, as I said, we have, and I put this in the 3 Brain video, go and search that video out on YouTube or in my private membership portal if you're a member of that. So we have the real guilt, which is in the heart brain, and the false guilt is more in the head brain. So what will it be like to experience a guilt-free life? What will that look like? Well, if we're not having the real guilt, which is when we're not treating people fairly, we're going to experience peace, serenity, freedom, happiness. We're going to sense a complete sense of ease inside our heart. And it was very interesting. Last year, somebody, inverted commas, came at me and accused me of doing something. And as they were talking to me, I was listening and I was tuning into my heart and I was searching, is there any scrap of guilt in there? Do I feel in any way that I have genuinely done something wrong? And what I felt was, in this particular instance, I'm not saying this is in other instances, but in this particular instance, my heart was completely clear. It was 100% clear, absolutely. And there was no guilt. There was no trace of guilt. So we can tune in. We know the truth because our heart knows the truth, and you can't override the truth. The head brain tries to do that, but fundamentally, we cannot override the truth because these internal organs, they are our feedback system and they never lie. So if we're not experiencing false guilt, which comes from this deep sense of unworthiness, lack of confidence, etc., what we're going to experience is trust, self-confidence, inner strength, self-value, self-worth. So when we truly value and love and respect ourselves and believe in ourselves, we will not have this false guilt arising, which comes more at a head level in terms of thinking, overthinking, worrying, ruminating, going over and over again in our head about the story of like, oh, I said that I couldn't meet my mother for coffee this morning and now I feel guilty. If that was truly the right thing for you, then that was and is the right thing for you. And if you search deep within as to why you feel guilty, for example, for not being able to meet a friend or meet your mother or your father or whoever it is for coffee, it will probably come down to a false guilt. So that's our little brief video lesson for today. And I'd like you to reflect and go away and write down your lists of real guilt and false guilt. You can even get a piece of paper and on the left hand side put, real guilt, on the right hand side put false guilt, and list all the different things that you feel guilty for and try and put them in one of the columns. Try and differentiate, is this a real healthy guilt and I need to apologize for something? In other words, in which case you need to actually do that to dispel the guilt. Or is it a false guilt and it comes back to I don't feel worthy enough and I don't value myself enough? Now, I do have on my website, on my blogs, a blog which explains this if you want to read it, print it off, etc. So please go ahead and do that if that appeals. And I want to share that next week, our monthly online training, which is different from these weekly webinars, is relearning to trust. Now, trust is a huge issue for most people, especially people if they're unhappy or ill. We lose trust early on in our life, but we don't realize we've lost trust. But losing trust is a big issue, and it leads to a lot of worry, anxiety, a lot of symptoms, a lot of illness, lack of belief in ourselves, self-doubt, a whole host of things. So I'm running my monthly training next week, and if you're catching this video later, you can always catch that training on demand. So check out my website, my newsletter for details of that. And remember that if you want notifications of any of my trainings, please go to the website, kimknighthealth.com, and sign up for the training list. You can also test drive some of my online programs, watch YouTube videos for a lot more educational videos. And as I said, I have the blog, so plenty of resources to follow up from this video. And of course, plenty of client success stories as well on my website. If you feel this has been useful, I would love you to share this video. This is such a big topic, and if I can help someone feel less guilty, then I've done my job. So thank you so much for sharing, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.